Hey y'all, here OS Reviews. In this video, we're taking a quick look at the TIMMKOO SR1. This is a smart digital voice recorder, and it actually makes me think that interesting hardware is finally becoming more accessible and affordable as well. And I say that because the super tall and narrow voice recorder has a touchscreen, and it's technically running on Android underneath the hood. Yes, the same operating system and guts as the smartphone that you may have in your pockets, and traces of the Android OS can be observed throughout the overall user interface. You can swipe down to access Wi-Fi and Bluetooth functionality, allowing it to connect to large language models for transcription, converting any notes, meetings, lectures into a typed format for enhanced productivity and labeling. And again, the overall design here actually reminds me of something like the Essential Gem phone or the Phone 2 that was supposed to be released, but unfortunately the company from Andy Rubin, the founder of Android, just later scaled down operations and it never saw the light of day. It was supposed to be another tall and narrow phone, definitely giving me those vibes on this SR1, kind of a quirky, unique hardware, reminiscent of the days of early Android, where we still had more wild and experimental form factors available from manufacturers trying to take a bigger risk. Or maybe something like the LG Chocolate BL40 phone was another example of a super tall and narrow device that is a predecessor to something like the Sony Xperia Mark I and Mark V devices that we have today are also very tall and narrow, but obviously this thing becomes even smaller and more compact. So this chocolate bar-shaped voice recorder actually comes from a same company that is producing the Innioasis Y1 digital MP3 player or DAP that we saw in a recent video as well. And both of these devices sell for around $50, and both are actually running on Android underneath the hood, powered by an ARM processor. It's just they're in the chassis or body of something that has a more retro appearance, especially in the Y1's case. It looks like a iPod Classic or iPod Video from back in the day. And again, we're seeing the same thing with the SR1. In fact, you can find it even on discount for even lower, around $36 for the 72GB version, versus a little bit more for the 136GB capacity variant. Now, a closer look here at the hardware. On the very top, you'll find stereo omnidirectional microphones, as well as an LED light that will flash red when it's currently recording. You can turn the LED as well on or off if you don't want that light to be flashing. And a benefit of a dedicated recorder like this is it does have more hardware-specific controls on the side, giving you a bit more tactility to begin recording at a moment's notice with this red accented button, as well as a bookmark key, volume rockers, and also skip track, play pause controls when you're reviewing back audio clips. The bottom here also features a loudspeaker, and then on the other side, you'll find a USB Type-C port for charging, data transfer. There's also a lock key, so if you pop it up like this, similar to on an iPod, it will disable the touchscreen and all the buttons from accidentally being triggered in a pocket. There's also going to be a micro SD card slot for expanding on the built-in memory, and this is where you'll get a 64 or 128GB card pre-installed, and also a 3.5mm headphone jack is also included, similar to a MP3 player or DAP digital audio player if you want to use that instead of the built-in speaker. Again, there is also built-in Bluetooth though if you want to connect to wireless headphones for more private listening as well. So it has plenty of I/O. The irony here is that actually I think it's a little bit better in terms of the availability of these physical controls versus the more music player centric Y1 was more simple and straightforward. This one lacking a dedicated volume key, also not having any expandable storage through a micro SD card slot, no slider for locking the device, but you get all of those controls on the SR1. Now, maybe only one aspect that I would change about the hardware though would be shifting the headphone jack onto the bottom of the device, because I think that's a bit more convenient if you're putting it into a pocket versus it dangling off from the side. The entire chassis, by the way, is also crafted out of a metal alloy with aluminum accents, so it does have a nice density and heft to it surprisingly with these chamfered edges. Compared to, again, the Y1 was a completely plastic or polycarbonate frame, felt more lightweight. I also want to show you guys what the built-in keyboard looks like because it is very customized. You have to turn it around because of how tall and narrow the touchscreen is, and you have this alphabetical layout like so. And I can't help but wonder if they are concerned about the smaller screen size of this player, perhaps it could have gone with a different layout. Like on the aforementioned Essential Gem phone, actually put the QWERTY slightly slanted to make the letters a little bit larger to press on, or even like on a BlackBerry Pearl, which combined two letters onto a single button and used predictive text entry. So those are some of the examples compared to just directly putting the layout here horizontally, but nonetheless it is kind of funky and cool to see on such a tall and narrow display. The recorder also comes in multiple colors, so this is the more stealthy black alloy finish, but you can also find it in a slightly more vibrant shade of green. There's a red version, a silver, and a gold. A few more top-line features, including the transcription from speech to text, apparently can function offline as well, with additional support for a password or PIN for added security, even though it's lacking a fingerprint scanner, which makes sense on hardware that is around $40 give and take. The roughly 1,100 mAh capacity battery is rated for around a day's use before you have to recharge it again, or around half a day's of continuous recording sessions. Now technically the specs inside include 1 gig of RAM and 8 gigs of storage, which houses the operating system, so again, relatively light there, but it's sufficient for just running the specific voice recording applications in the customized launcher that it's currently set to. And speaking of, the speech-to-text transcription is available for English, German, French, Italian, Spanish, with recording distance granting you all the way up to 10 meters away if you're using it in the lecture mode, so rather sensitive microphones on board. As for packaging contents on the inside, aside from the SR1, you'll also find a purple braided USB Type-C cable for data transfer as well as charging purposes. You get a 3.5mm cable here, as well as a quick user guide, which is pretty well documented, showing off the various features, including line-in audio recording support. So if you have a wired microphone, you can plug it into the 3.5mm jack as well. There's even an AI functionality, which does require the internet connection by Wi-Fi, again, connecting to something like ChatGPT, large language model behind the scenes, which can summarize some of the key points, as well as proofread the text that you're transcribing, translating it into a second language as some other examples. Again, pretty impressive that we have some of the software features now available on a voice recorder, which is in the $40 range, running on Android with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Obviously, if you don't want to use these more advanced features, you could still ignore them and only use it for recording notes and memos, but it's nice to have this available if you want to access them without really breaking the bank. Again, Android-powered hardware is becoming more affordable, it looks like, in more interesting forms lately. And also in terms of recording, you can use different formats like AAC as well as WAV, which is going to be the hi-fi mode at 256 kilobits per second. So those three profiles correspond to the STT boost mode, which is again the most compressed, just for speech to text, enhancing voice while reducing some ambient noise around you for interviews and lectures, versus vocal boost is going to be slightly better for podcasts and even noisier environments, versus the hi-fi mode might be best if you're trying to record some music in the highest resolution format. And now exploring some of the functions as well as menus a little bit more. By the way, this is as bright as this screen gets, which is a IPS LCD screen, and impressively, it is a fully laminated panel. There is no gap between the glass and the screen underneath. So it's actually quite vibrant and bright looking for a budget device in its class. You can activate a power saver mode as well as see the remaining capacity of the storage card as well as the device's built-in memory. Basic time and date settings here can also be found, in addition to checking for any system firmware updates if you are connected to the internet. As for the main menu, everything here is pretty much centered around recording. So we have the different modes that we saw there from earlier. Basic file manager can also be found here, as well as a tips and tricks guide. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by the functionality here, you can tap on all of these sections to go through a more detailed tutorial, which is not a bad idea. Finally, swiping here onto the side goes into a secondary screen where you can check out some recent recordings, search for additional tags, and sort by other options, including date created or by name alphabetically, as well as long hold on these recordings if you want to add additional tags for better organization purposes like meetings, lecture, music, so on and so forth. Now, I will say some of the touch targets are a little bit small on the touchscreen, inevitably, for a more compact device, which is so tall and narrow, but generally speaking, I found it to still be a pretty satisfactory experience. And you can tap to go inside. You're able to read back some of the transcription there in real time, as well as add additional bookmarks into the session. Again, you're able to bring up the virtual keyboard that we saw there from earlier here as well. And interestingly enough, on the search functionality inside of the notes, it reverts into a more classic QWERTY layout, which I do prefer, compared to the alphabetical layout when you were in the Wi-Fi as well as settings menu. So there's kind of two sets of keyboards. So yeah, I would say it's a relatively simple and straightforward menu system that's pretty easy to navigate between these two main pages, all centered around recording. However, you won't find any extras here, including noting there is no separated folder here just for music exclusively. You can still drag and drop music files over using the USB port or on the SD card, and then going into the file browser, you can play it back using it as a DAP or digital audio player / MP3 player. However, it's not explicitly called out as a separated function, which I think might be a little bit more elegant if they did want to push that 2-in-1 functionality in the future. Also, you won't find any photo, video support, and although it has built-in Wi-Fi, again, there is no browser, nor are there any streaming services built in like Spotify, Amazon Music. FM radio are all some features that you won't find on this current software version. Recording continuously with transcription turned on for longer than say 2 hours, it does get a little bit warmer at the bottom region over here. I wouldn't say it thermal throttles, performance was still fine because it's just a voice recorder at the end of the day, but it is a minor point that I observed, so probably not the fastest processor in the world, but it does alright for the basic audio note functionality it's been programmed for. So beginning an audio session here, we'll hold on the record key for 2 seconds, and now the audio recording has automatically started, as you can see here, with the light turning red as the session is in progress. You can again disable this light if you want to hide it from view, and we're able to see the transcription in real time with a slight moments latency as it processes what I'm trying to say, and then converts it into text for me to reference later on, which is pretty cool. And once we are satisfied, we can then kind of tap on pause or save. Again, a couple more seconds here for it to catch up with the full transcription before it gets generated. During the pause mode, the light here will also shine blue. If desired, we can also read back the full transcription here, and I have to say it's really not bad in terms of accuracy. All of the text with autocorrect seems to be doing a good job, also adding some punctuation here and there as well, getting the main sentiment correct. Quite useful again for students, as well as maybe business professionals who are in a lot of meetings or lectures, or just want to jot down some of your ideas and quickly have them converted into a text format on the go. And again, for this particular part, the transcription actually doesn't require internet connectivity. Internet is only needed if you want to further transform this into other formats like summarizing, bullet points, generating more ideas via ChatGPT. So you can actually turn off Wi-Fi and this part will still function, which is good. The monitoring language here can also be adjusted into some of those aforementioned languages, again demonstrating what the microphones and built-in loudspeaker sounds like. You can again disable this light if you want to hide it from view, and we're able to see the transcription in real time. So really not bad, I have to say, in terms of the clarity of the microphones on such a low-cost voice recorder. And as aforementioned, pretty much all of these other modes will access the same interface, and then applying a slightly different EQ, slightly shaping the sensitivity of the microphone depending on the mode that you're selecting. Now, in terms of the auto recording part, what I will say is that right now you can set up again the scheduling functionality for it to start at certain times in the day, but there is no kind of sound-activated recording, which is an interesting omission that we did see on some of the older voice recorders in the past. So for example, if it gets louder in a certain decibel, when it hears sound, it will try to record, but that is currently missing in the automation tab. Also jumping into the aforementioned AI section here next, again, this part here will require you to connect to the internet with the main functions labeled down below. Let's actually start here with the bottom translation. Tapping again here allows us to choose a secondary language of our choice, and you can find actually plenty of options around the world for translating into a second language of choice. So let's actually choose something like Spanish maybe here for now. This will then take a couple of seconds, and we can now visit the overall result over here, read it back on the screen, which is actually not bad in terms of general clarity, despite being so tall and narrow. You can even tap on play for it to be read out loud to you. However, the voice for reading back text is a little on the robotic side, as you can hear there. So it's a nice accessibility mode, but hopefully they can make the reading back function just a little bit more natural, although not bad in terms of general quick translations. Now let's try some of the other modes here as well. Here's what the mind map, for example, will look like instead. And once generated, it will look like this. Now, it's not quite in a visual format, I would say, compared to a real mind map. I kind of expect a main point and then some maybe subpoints similar to nodes on a tree. But on here, it's still mostly bullet points. It's telling us that I was talking about the indicator light, testing it out using different technologies, getting the main context overall, but not that different from a summary function. Here's also a spruce up function. And looks like in this case, it has generated also a kind of recap of the audio recording. And we can also change the text size as well, font size, in addition to the speaker if you're trying to go from a female to a male voice for reading back the text, in addition to the reading speed as well. So if you are trying to have it be read out a little bit faster versus slower, you can change this as well. I've also generated the summarize and analyze function, so it's telling us that this audio recording is stating its transcription and doing kind of a quick test, versus the key points, again, uses a couple of bullet points there. And you can actually long press to enable multiple of these functions and process them in batch instead of only tapping on them one by one, taking a couple more seconds here to process. Including this one here for punctuation has added a little bit more auto corrections when it comes to periods, question marks, expressions. Proofreading is another one here that has, again, corrected any spelling typos. Summary and highlighting bullet point functions are probably the most useful ones if you're trying to review longer notes later on. Now, what I will say though is it looks like you do have a token that is available for you per month. So you'll see your quota at the very top here. It kind of depends on the size or length, I should say, of your audio recordings. But generally speaking, if you are looking at an hour-long recording, you can access the large language model for generating summaries for approximately 10 to 15 hours a month as part of the quota, I would say. And then the number here will reset, allowing you to use it again the next month. There is no paid membership plan, so everything here is included as you purchase it up front. There is no additional subscription, which is good. So just keep that in mind. These AI features aren't necessarily unlimited, but I would say if you're just using it casually for just the most important meetings and lectures, a couple of hours a month, it shouldn't be too problematic. The basic functionality in terms of recording, as well as transcription in your native language, doesn't take up that quota. It's only when you transform it using bullet points, as well as summary formats, translation, that it activates the large language model and that quota. So there we have it. That is more or less our hands-on closer look at the TIMMKOO SR1. I have to say this is a pretty interesting hardware that looks surprisingly stylish and sleek because of the ultra thin and narrow touchscreen display, in addition to offering on-device transcription and with Wi-Fi turned on, giving you some more of the large language model support as well. Overall working quite nicely for a budget device, I have to say. As for slight cons, currently the audio that you are recording can't really be transmitted wirelessly by email or sharing it onto your cloud drive. Even though it has built-in Wi-Fi, it's really just for accessing the large language models. So I think it could be neat to consider in a future software update if they allowed you to also maybe sign in to your Google Drive or some type of other file sharing wireless type of situation if you want to use that instead of manually dragging the files out using cable, taking advantage of that wireless connectivity. Additionally, perhaps adding another tab just for music playback, even though you can access it in the file browser, could make it a little bit more intuitive as a two-in-one device. But some of those quirks aside, I do think it's a pretty cool looking piece of hardware that is surprisingly fun to take a closer look at. You can check out more details if you're interested in something like this in the links down below. A pretty neat gadget as another example of something technically running on Android these days in the links down below. For now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the TIMMKOO SR1.